All right, here we are, guys. Circumcision, a newborn's nightmare. So I contemplated on how I was going to go about, I'm going to put photos, am I not going to put photos? You know, I asked myself this multiple times and I couldn't not. Like, we're adults. Like, if you're here, you're here. And, you know, this is the procedure, this is the reality, and this is what's happening. Let's move this over here. This is better. Feng shui for me feels a little bit better. Okay. So you'll see on the top right photo, that is a baby, a fake baby that is in a circumstrand. So the circumstrand actually already has the imprint of the baby, like it's ready. And there are these Velcro straps that they put to force the baby down so that they can perform its procedure, right? To me, looking like that is enough, it's enough. Like, I don't need, honestly, it's like someone probably, you don't need to see anything else. Like, I don't want to know anyone. Obviously, you know, maybe at this point, this is wrong. Below the circumstrand is a graphic that I mean, I shot some tears, like, you know, they just like tears just come out of your eye. That was me. Clamps, the incision of slicing, cutting, and ripping the foreskin off. They rip as much foreskin, which has miles of nerve endings, one of the most sensitive part of a man. They take away as much foreskin as appropriate before the baby, or that, you know, later turns on that they can't procreate. So like, they are getting in there and really creating that slice. So right? Circumference and incision. So you can really understand why the term is named, like what it is. And then you will see some sutures over here. These are pretty intense. I didn't even know that there was this many sutures. And one thing that I found to be interesting is some, you'll notice, I think it's kind of been normalized, but like some penises are curving right, they're curving left. There's kind of a little bit of a situation, but there is in large part because the incision wasn't like a perfect aligned, that when it can tilt the head of the penis or the penis over one direction, depending on like how they were able to be accurate in alignment of the cut. I thought that was pretty intense. Okay. So in this presentation today, we will be discussing the origin. Where did circumcision start? When did it become popular? When was this practice adopted? The procedure, and can babies really feel pain? There are some people out there that are passing misinformation saying that babies cannot feel pain, so we will be discussing that. We will also go through what led me here, the effects on the male spiritual body and soul, the narratives and trauma-based mind control, theta brainwaves and subconscious programming, effects on mother-infant bonding, psychological, neurological, and behavioral issues and the repercussions, effects of circumcision on women. And I've got a load of resources. There was a part of me that almost wanted to go there first, just so you could like see my legitimacy and just, you know, how this has been very much studied, very much discussed in a lot of topics. Again, there is not a single health organization that is recommending circumcision as a practice. So there are a lot of different pioneers. I wasn't like, you know, I'm going to straight up find the person. I can imagine maybe he was a guy. And I'm not saying that like I'm not trying to be an insult, because a lot of them mostly are. You know, I'm not going to give them that much attention, but what really did stand out, because we're all very much familiar with John Harvey Kellogg. It's the Kellogg cereal, the one that is actually still poisoning children today. You should see the ingredients. And these ingredients, he even admitted, like really weren't the best. He wanted to create a cereal so bland that it would remove any carnal desire, any sexual excitement and whatsoever. Because if you're having a pleasurable palate, maybe that would enhance a little bit more sexual activity, masturbation. So he created a mass anti-masturbation campaign. I mean, and this was rather large. And he was a eugenicist and a pseudoscientist who had this whole complex. What do they call it? The sanitarian. And he would even get people to. He promoted like 15 enemas a day to stay that clean. And he thought that sex was probably the biggest sin and one of the most disgusting things that exists. So he promoted to parents, listen, your kids are not studying, they're masturbating, they need to be clean, they need to study the Bible. So tie your son, your teenage boy, to the bed, and without any anesthetic, circumcise him. He also had there was a couple of boys, I don't know how many, but I remember when in the research, there was like one boy in particular that a doctor like went up to him and was like, oh, like what's going on? And he showed him, and his foreskin was pulled over the head of the penis and sewn shut. So that was actually like another way to prevent masturbation, right? So like this is during a time when, people were believing, I mean, you have the Salem witch trials, like you have stuff like that. Like people are believing a lot of misinformation. And so it's like, you masturbate, you can go blind. You masturbate, like you're going to grow hair on your hand. And people were eating it up. They were that fearful. So if you have somebody who is prominent and a doctor and who's really trying to enforce, a more solid type of society that deals with anti-masturbation, and you believe in that, then you're gonna do these things. It's what they knew. I didn't mention, it's also very important that for the girls, that they pour carbolic acid on the women's or the girls' clitorises. So this was like a full-blown attack on kids and not having them experience any form of their sexual beauty and their sexual prime. Everything is completely shameful. In this book, in one of these books, Plain Facts for Old and Young, or The Science of Human Life from Infancy to Old Age. So what does it say? An illustrated encyclopedia for special knowledge for all classes on hygiene of sex. So it was all like hygiene, right? And he was a purist. So he was really working towards the purification of people, of humans, very much like what Hitler was doing. So some of the informed side effects he put on here, such as change in sudden disposition. Like if you were to perform, put the acid on the girl, sew up, cut up, whatever it was. Disgust for simple food, biting of fingernails, palpitation of the heart, green sickness, epileptic fits, wetting the bed. Let's say aversion to society of girls, like weak backs, pain in the limbs and stiffness in the joints, bad positions in bed, lack of development of the breasts, failure for mental capacity, sleeplessness. I mean, it just absolutely goes on. And then you can kind of correlate some of these things that he's listed, and we'll get into it later, how they mimic the actual reality of the fact that these sleeplessness, I mean, that's a huge one for babies. So as we can think about these campaigns and this wide span of information that is targeted to abuse, like there is no like other way around it. Because if you were to dig and dig and dig when it comes to religion, when it comes to medical information, when it comes to cleanliness, like it all narrows down to the fact that they are trying to remove sexual pleasure from people. There's this woman, Patricia Robinette. Here's her book. She's amazing. If you want to go deeper, if you really have it in, this is a great text. So she was, she had I can never say it correctly. She was female circumcised, just to be simple, let's be honest. So she was with it kind of starts off, she's with a partner, and he goes on to tell her, like, hey, Patricia, actually, you do not look like all the other women. You look like my ex-wife, and my ex-wife actually was circumcised, because circumcised was paid for by the Blue Cross Blue Shield up until 1977. So female circumcision was actually removed, and there's a bill that was protected by the female genital, so it's the FGM in 1996. But even though there's this bill, it was the Academy of American Pediatrics in May 2010 have come in trying to bypass a lot of the clauses within the bill itself to still cut up women as they see fit. So like they still recommend that if a woman has like a larger labia, which is totally natural, right? They come in all different shapes and sizes, just as penises do. Then they still want the right to cut up as they see fit. So like we're still on a journey here, and we're not completely free of circumcision at all. I mean, I'm here because I'm talking about males, so it is still very heavily normalized and happening probably as we speak. So she went on this crazy journey of recognizing what happened. She was unlocking memories. She was on a mission to really understand the ins and outs of this. She traces back to childhood and remembers that she had clear plans to commit suicide. She said how she was going to do it. I'm not going to tell you how she said she was going to do it. I'm going to leave that out. But she was suicidal and very unhappy. So as she found out about the circumcision, her mom was heavily abusive and very neglectful, had a very toxic relationship. Anyway, it's just this crazy, wild journey. And you can think about the psychological effects that happened to her, right? And not even know, she had no idea. No idea. And Playgirl, actually, I wanted to put that in 1973, has also advocated the procedure of female circumcision to enhance pleasure, which, you know, it obviously does quite the opposite. It's not helping whatsoever. I put down here lobotomies and asterisks. I did that pretty much just because, like, do you remember even when those were a thing, and we look back and we're like, holy shit, like that was something that people used to do when people had no as anesthetic, and that was normal. My hope is that we can look at circumcision and male circumcision in a way that we look at lobotomies as being horrific, traumatizing, abuse, assault, and wrong. Like that is my biggest dream, my biggest hope. So here's her book, The Rape of Innocence, Female Genital Mutilation and Circumcision in the United States. So she talks a lot more about she gives a lot of information other than her story, but there were a couple of things that I wrote down because there were some quotes that really stuck out specifically for me. It is time for open, honest communication and education, 100% transparency. It is time for us to scrutinize all our beliefs, including religious, medical, and social practices, so that if there is an addiction to some sort of sexual use and abuse of babies and children, it can be laid to rest. Ending abuse is a gift to everyone. Allowing it to continue is abusive to both victim and abuser. Those who abuse hate themselves. So what happens if you abuse a child, and what are they learning? And is that a perpetuating cycle that we're creating? So that's something that's like really important, which is why it's feeding back into circumcision even being alive in the first place. We'll get into that programming later. She was also criticized by this man named John. I can't remember like what his association was to her. And he was like, Patricia, this is a topic that men need to be talking about. You should not be talking about male circumcision. Go off and go talk about breast cancer. And she was like, I don't want to. Like, that is not something that interests me. That isn't something that I think is what we need to talk about. This is very severe. She says, women need to talk about circumcision because men don't want to think that the most sensitive part of their penis was cut off and thrown in the trash. Like, what are, like, other than selling it to the beauty industry, like, what's happening? Is it that a wasteful? Is there a part of the male anatomy and body that is just complete and utter trash? Are you implying that, like, God got it wrong? That the male body is in its natural form dirty and gross? Many people have difficulty reading about circumcision or watching a video. If observation bothers adults, imagine how the act itself affects little children. No memory is ever lost, just temporarily forgotten. No medical organization in the world recommends circumcision, like I've said. I have been in a training program, and it has been one of the most profound things I've ever done in my entire life. It's been 6 weeks, and I'm training with Kim and Ami. And I feel I've been telling friends, I've been telling my mentor, Brenda Pantango, she is exquisite. I feel like I have been given divine keys and have been unlocking memories that I had absolutely no idea. Like, I've always known I had a great childhood. Like, I'm very, very blessed and very lucky. But like, I can't pinpoint. Like, looking back feels foggy. Like, there were certain things, but all of a sudden within the past 6 weeks, I have been recollecting things, like, all the way from 1 to 2 years old. I'm not joking. And I'm bringing this up just for a moment, and I'm not getting too much into detail, because this is something that has been brought to my attention because of this memory that's been validated that I want to share. Because I was reading this book and she was asking certain questions about doctors and playing doctor as kids, and I was laying in bed a few nights ago, and I all of a sudden had a image of my old pediatrician come up. I have not thought about this guy in, I can't even tell you how long. Like, I even remembered his name. I remembered everything. And I remember seeing his face, and I remember my panties being pulled down and him looking at me. Like, I see it. I'm not going to get into detail. I mean, my turns out that this is like a thing. This is why I'm bringing it. Like, it is what it is, what it is, right? Like, get the doctor, check on my kid. But like, we don't think about this from a child's perspective. And like, I have that perspective now because I remember how it makes me feel. That doctor was a stranger. And I felt so shamed and so violated that I remember it had an effect on me. So if this can just encourage you to consider, like, sometimes we don't think that these kids, these babies can't hear us, they're not going to remember. They do. It becomes a part of who they are. It becomes a part of their consciousness. It attaches in a way that has an effect on who they become as a human being. Because I can trace that shame that I felt, and I have that perspective. So if we could just maybe choose, because to me, that was just a stranger. Although he's the family doctor, he's a stranger to a child. Let's just consider that. I have a vagina. If you have a vagina, if you had a baby, you know what a vagina looks like. if you've seen a penis, this is like, I just felt the need to just bring that up, because if we were to take the due diligence, like if we were, I would have felt so much better. And I know children will too, than having strangers, although they are doctors, strangers looking at them. All right, that's my rant. Thank you. Remember, this is what to say, what not to say, what to share, what not to share, guys. Like, okay, moving on.